And just like that, it all ended. We ran and ran until we found refuge with a pair of local farmers who were willing to hide us from the Nazis. Anders and I huddled in solitude, hearing only snippets of news from a poorly tuned radio and our kindly hosts. Months passed, and on the 4th of May, Denmark was liberated from its German occupiers. But the war did not end quietly like I had hoped. There was a maelstrom of activity as Nazi collaborators were put into camps, snitches were executed by the resistance, and others were put on trial for treason. But in time, life began to return to its familiar patterns. We went back home. The house had been searched, though it was otherwise as we had left it. Once we cleared away the mess, it felt like no time had passed at all, like it was all a bad dream. That in all the nooks and crannies, the ghosts of the past were waiting for us to let down our guard, lest we forgot what happened and who we had lost. I saw Liva at the train station the other day. She was handing out pamphlets with a pair of young revolutionaries on her heels. She was a hero to them, both for her actions during the war and the organizing she had undertaken since. When she caught me staring, she smiled awkwardly, then looked away. Perhaps she was sorry for involving me in her plans and for the people who were hurt by our actions. But none of this stopped her from promoting her cause. I wonder if she will ever succeed. After he escaped from the train station, Peter had seemingly vanished into thin air. I often found myself wondering what had happened to him, until one day I heard a torrent of profanity from behind me. I couldn't help but smile as I turned to see Peter, haggard but alive. He had returned to Tinglev and was moving a load of car parts to his auto shop. You would have thought the tools had been Nazis from the way he swore while fumbling with them. Stahl died on that dark winter's night, defending a system which was collapsing around him. His ideology made him lash out with violence. I cannot understand how a person comes to be that way, but I must believe that future generations will learn from this horrible war so that its mistakes are not repeated. How could anyone ever forget such dark years? Margit wrote to tell me that Wolfgang returned to Germany in the closing days of the war. He had felt duty-bound to surrender to the Allies, along with the rest of his men. He was a proud soldier who was trapped by a system which exploited his pride. In a different time and a different place, he might have gone down a better path, and both he and Margit might have been happier for it. My hand shakes as I write these words, unable to contain my sorrow. Esther and Sophia's bodies have been identified at the Neuengamme concentration camp, though details of their deaths are sparse. Were they at least together? Or did little Sophia die alone and afraid, while her helpless mother perished in some distant cell? They were so close to escape. Could I have done more for them than I did? I cannot claim to fully understand Reinhard. He was a selfish crook, indifferent to the harm his actions caused, but he was also smart. He was careful. He didn't rush headlong into danger unless there was a profit to be made. His actions at the station will always confound me. What made him so rash, so jittery, and so reckless? I don't know what happened to him after his arrest, but given how the Nazis treated their prisoners, I cannot imagine that there was a pleasant end to his journey. Olgert Vestergaard requested a house call today. He was complaining about chest pains, but his heart sounded perfectly healthy. I think his pain stems from something entirely different. Something that gigantic fortune of his can never cure. He was recently given a small fine of 2,000 crowns for collaborating with the occupation, but none of his ill-gotten lands were given back to the poor farmers. None of his factories were shuttered. Nothing was confiscated. He will barely feel that fine, and the people he hurt will never see one bit of it. I miss Margit. All I have now is our correspondence. She cut all ties with her father and moved up north to Randers. It seems like the big city suits her, and she even writes short stories for a local magazine. Her stories are tinged with melancholy, but I'm happy to see her doing so well. I talked to the pastor at church this Sunday. He expressed sadness about fewer people showing up for church, and even fewer staying for coffee after. Neither the Danes nor the Germans seem to be able to stand being in the same room together. I tried convincing him to show patience. The town needs more time to heal. Following the death of his father, Heinrich and his mother left Tinglev and returned to their hometown in Germany. I saw them leaving. The boy wore a freshly pressed Hitlerjugend outfit on his way to the departing train and insisted on hailing at every soldier he passed. Looking at him, even after Hitler's death, will little boys keep believing in such nonsense? I saw Charlotte at the market today. She was alone and could barely get the attention of any of the merchants. Even the villagers who had collaborated with the occupation acted like she wasn't there. Perhaps it wasn't intentional. Maybe they simply didn't notice her because they were too busy washing their own hands. I spoke to her, and her face lit up in a smile, though words seemed to fail my formerly chatty cousin. We shopped together, and despite all the cold stares, I think she was happy for the company. I visited the inn last Thursday. Mida was there, standing behind the bar and looking like her usual self. She keeps busy, serving beer and bantering with the locals. But every so often, I catch her staring blankly at the walls. These spells never last for long, but it seems her time inside the camps has left a mark. I wonder how long it will linger. For some people, the scars might remain forever. The clinic was boarded up after Harold's death, and I was forced to start making house calls on my bicycle. The town council put out an advertisement looking for a new doctor to take over the clinic. I wonder if the new owner will be German or Danish, and which the town would prefer. After the war, Papa was interned at the Forhus camp, along with many other fathers in the German minority who had volunteered to help the occupiers. I visit him as often as I can. He seems to earnestly regret his actions and the harm they did to our family. In time, I hope that we might come to understand each other better. I pray that he will soon be released. Our sleepy little town had been ripped apart by the war, and even my hands, the hands of a nurse, were not entirely free of blood. Like so many others, I had acted in self-interest, seeking safety for myself and my loved ones. But the gains I made came at a great cost to our community. Death had visited Tinglev and left its mark. How long would it take for the wounds of war to heal?